Welcome to the Being Human UT podcast, where Dr. Randy Jasmine and Dr. Jim Hindigus will discuss issues relative to the humanities and technology at Utah Tech University. And now your hosts for Being Human UT podcast, Dr. Randy Jasmine and Dr. Jim Hindigus.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Jasmine. I'm here with my partner, Jim Hindigus, and believe it or not, we are here for episode 26 of the Being Human UT podcast. And we have a very special guest joining us today. And once I introduce the special guest, Jim, I would like to get your take on how you felt the recent Digital Humanities Utah 9 conference went that was hosted here at Utah Tech. So going to put you on the spot, but I want you to be ready for it. So we are joined by Associate Research Professor in the Program of Digital Humanities at Brigham Young University, Jeremy Browne. And Jeremy, Brigham Young University is really uniquely placed in the state of Utah because you are the only institution that has an official program in digital humanities. If you could tell us a little bit about the work that you do there and about the program and the kinds of research that's being conducted there.
Yeah, so we have an academic minor in the digital humanities, and we have an office called the Office of Digital Humanities that's housed under the dean in the College of Humanities. And that's another big distinction. For example, at the University of Utah, where they have the Digital Matters Lab, that's in the Marriott Library. And that's pretty common throughout the United States, is that you'll have your Digital Humanities Center in the library, whereas ours is in the College of Humanities. But our program is very old, goes back to the early 80s. Back when it was called Computing in the Humanities or Humanities Computing.
Nice.
In fact, the acronym for the minor used to be CHUM. CHUM. Computing in the Humanities, right?
As long as there's no sharks around.
Yeah, exactly. So, we really started with computational linguistics sort of things, but also with teaching humanities majors back in the day how to use a CD-ROM database or how to use Office applications like Excel and Word. And then over time, it just developed into more and more. And it was in 2013 that we renamed it from Computing in the Humanities to Digital Humanities to conform largely to a global movement, which was, digital humanities was taking root all over the world and largely doing what we had been doing for decades, plus a little bit more. And so, we tend to have about 30 or 40 students enrolled in our minor at any time. We've served students from every single major on campus except for nursing because they have a very regimented program, so they can't take electives like others can. We used to have, I won't mention the departments by name, but over in our fine arts and communications, we used to have professors who would say, don't take my class until you go take their class. And so it wasn't an official, prerequisite, but the kind of thing was, you'll do a lot better in my class if you go over to digital humanities and learn the things that they're teaching before. And so we have our minor is a required class called Intro to Digital Humanities, which is a survey of the field, and then 4 electives, and they can choose from, I think we have 8 to 10 courses at 200 and 300 level on Intro to Programming, Web Development, Print Publishing, and then Digital Humanities Research Methods. They take 4 electives there, and then they do a capstone project, which is either an individual project or a technology internship of some kind. And it's a great program. It's been going strong now for over 10 years as in its current format. And we really like it.
That's great. And Jim, I mentioned to you that BYU and their professors and students are always a big force at the DHU conferences statewide, and DHU 9 was no exception.
It was a great conference. I personally experienced it on a few levels, and one was I was part of the planning committee, and so you got to experience that stress of, okay, we have enough submissions? Did we get all our rooms reserved? All that kind of stuff. That I personally had to get the keys to unlock the building.
You were the key master.
I was the key master, so that was just an added element to it. And so there was just a lot of anticipation building up to it. But I really enjoyed it. And having been to a few conferences in my academic career, I really prefer these types of conferences where it's just a little bit smaller, that you're actually going to see most of the people that are there, that that you can go to most of the presentations. And I'm sure we've all had that experience of going to some monstrous conference where you're like, all right, well, there's about 4 things going on at the same time that I want to go to, so I'll just choose this. Or there's just way too many people here, and I'll try to connect with a few, and I'll network with a few. But here, I mean, I think you can get the real experience with everyone. And so as a participant and in the conference, also it felt like it went well to just be able to connect with people and see what they were doing. And I thought it went really well. I thought that everything that we presented on was all that was presented on was very informative, very relevant, and helped I think progress the field, and I was happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, and just quickly, and then we'll turn it back over to you, Jeremy. I was really happy to see the contributions from Utah Tech graduate students. They were able to present in a couple of the panels, and in particular, the presentation on cookies was really, really interesting, and the work that Dr. Joy McMurrin is doing, and her graduate student who presented with her on that was something that was pretty eye-opening. She did a presentation at the Global Polytechnic Summit back in 2023. I don't know if you remember that or if you were there, but she and Lacey Hope presented on, the environmental waste issues that come with cell phones and laptops and things like that. And her work always makes me think about things. It's great work. It's well-researched. And I always walk away saying, Joy, you've made me worry about something that I wasn't worrying about before your presentation. But that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So I thought that was great. But Jeremy, I also had the opportunity to attend your presentation. And I was really impressed by the student-centered focus that you took. You titled it, I believe, something along the lines of Teaching Program Without Math. And you talked about how that was a little bit hyperbolic, but the whole purpose of that title was to make it a student-centered, student-focused class. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, and to go back to what you said, I'm going to get the name wrong, but Professor Bakabak?
Bakabak, yeah.
Bakabak. Okay. She had a panel of Utah Tech graduate students as well that blew me away. And I thought it was actually the same kind of thing that I do in my classes, which is that these graduate students haven't yet had the resources or experience to conduct a research project of their own. But in her class, they propose what they would do. And that's the first step for everyone. And so rather than have them, I'm sure that part of the course was evaluating other people's work and so forth, but letting them express themselves in terms of what are their interests. There was one on the rhetoric of QR codes. There was another one on using AI to translate legalese into common speech so that clients working with lawyers will have some idea of what's in all of these documents. I mean, this is incredible stuff that is very meaningful to the students. And that's what I try to do in my classes as well. Is that the number one thing I try to remember is my students are human. They are people. They have needs. They have struggles. They have strengths. And if we just teach the class the same way to everyone and don't allow for those differences between the students, it's not going to be as successful. And so I had a really bad experience as an undergraduate in believe it or not, a math class. This was freshman math. I think it was freshman algebra or something. And I'd never been very good at math through high school. And the graduate student teaching it had what he thought was a great system. Okay, here's the chapter in the textbook that we're going to be reading. And then here are the problems at the end I want you to do. And then at the beginning of every class, I want you to come in and write on the board the number of the problem that you struggled with or problems. And if you come in there and somebody's already put that problem, you put a star next to it. So he would arrive at class just as it was beginning and look at the board and say, oh, okay, this is what we need to do. And he would go, spend, I think about the first 20 minutes or so reviewing these problems. And in his mind, this is great. I'm helping these students where they need. But he never considered that the students who had problems that nobody else did, when they had difficulties with problems that nobody else faced problems on, he never addressed those. And that was me. I was realizing at this time that I approached academics from a different angle than a lot of people, especially math. I'm one of those people who excelled at geometry but struggled at algebra. And so I never got the help I needed. And as a lowly freshman on campus, I didn't know where to turn for the resources, and I wound up failing the class. And it was very much a wake-up call to myself. On the other hand, it was my sophomore year, I took a photography class, and I had no idea who I was signing up for. I had done some photography in high school. This was back in the film days, pre-digital.
Darkroom.
Yeah, darkroom photography.
That's
yeah.
amazing stuff. Yeah.
And so, but in this class, they went easy on us and allowed us to do slides that we could just drop off at the photo store to get developed. It turned out that the instructor was the university photographer. His name was Mark Philbrook, and the Association of American University Photographers or something like that has now named their Photographer of the Year award the Philbrook.
Wow.
Okay, so this was somebody who was really big in his field, but coming down to teach first-year students. And he had an incredibly different system, which was, okay, let's look at some slides of examples of the principle I want to teach. Now, your assignment for this weekend is to go out and submit 2 slides that demonstrate this principle. And so we would arrive in class, and he'd take all of our slides and number them, and we had put our names on them, but he would number them and put them in the slide carousel. And then we'd all sit there and watch the slides, and we all had rating sheets. So that, and we'd go through and, make comments on each of them totally anonymously.
Right.
Every once in a while, he would stop and say, okay, whose is this? We got to call you out. This is so good, And what I noticed was through the semester, not only did our abilities go up, but our critical eyes also increased, that we were able to be more scrutinizing on the photography as we progressed together. And so I kind of took those 2 examples, and when it became my turn to teach as a graduate student, I said, okay, how can I do something that's more like what Mark Philbrook did and less like this graduate student did? So to your point to my presentation, I won't mention on air which big-name university it was that I signed up for an online Python course from them last summer. Because I said, look, I'm going to be teaching Python this year. I want to, kind of fill in my gaps and know how to approach this. And I mean, we were factoring prime numbers, or I can't even remember what it was. It was finding derivatives and all sorts of stuff, because they approached it from a very mathematical standpoint, which for a lot of computer scientists, computers are math. In the humanities, we want to use that math underneath to analyze the language on top. And so the question became, what assignments can I give these students that are meaningful to them and humanities oriented so that we can do as little math as possible, and they will come out with skills that will be useful to them on the other side.
And so what are some of the approaches that you take in the class? Mm-hmm. I know you talked about a couple of exercises that you do.
Yeah. So one of the big ones is, and this is an example by non-example, is I actually found a quote where an author says, well, if you're going to teach recursion, which is in computer science, you're calling a function again and again and again, instead of trying to do a Fibonacci sequence, which is the classic example of how you use recursion or what you can use recursion for. They said, check to see if a word is a palindrome. And the way they do it was by taking the first and last letters and comparing them. And if they are the same, okay, then let's cut those off and then compare the next 2, cut those off, compare the next 2. And once we get to a word that is 1 character or no characters long, we know that it's a palindrome because we've sequentially eliminated the first and last letters all the way down. That's not how you and I would do a palindrome, right? We would just simply write the word backwards and see if it's the same.
Right.
And that works out to be 1 line of code in Python. And so instead of giving them even like simple tasks, one of the things that we start off with are games, like simple games. Chutes and Ladders is a great example because it requires students to model the data, which is the board, and then model the process of playing the game. And it's amazing to watch the students realize that there are shortcuts because the board is a grid, but you traverse it linearly, right? When you get to the end of the row, you just move up 1 square. And so you could actually model Chutes and Ladders as one long row of squares with pointers that point from one to the other. So if you land on this square, that means you have to move back to this square. If you land on that square, you might go forward. And then one of the things that I realized I didn't teach soon enough last semester, so I taught it first day this semester, was flowcharts. And this is almost a dying art in computer science, especially with object-oriented programming. It becomes less palatable to write some sort of linear or branching flow through your program. But getting the students to logic, or to use the logic of some sort of process. When do I ask the user something? What do I do if this happens? How long do I do that? And have them actually sketch that out graphically before they sit down to program has paid huge dividends this semester.
Yeah, that sounds really like a kind of engaging type approach, an engaging class for students, particularly students who might not have, who would be kind of more geared towards, like you say, the humanities element, the language element that's on top of the math.
Well, and I didn't get to where we start to give them choices. I mean, first of all, they always have the choice of how are they going to accomplish the problem. So if I say, hey, we're going to do Hi-Ho Cherry-O, which is a counting game for preschoolers. They decide how they're going to model the game board, how they're going to, what processes they're going to go through for each turn and so forth, how they determine who the winner is. But this time now, so they take their second midterm in the course on Thursday this week. And I've already told them, starting after that midterm, the class is wide open, that I have no lectures planned. What we do is you propose a project, and I will go through and break down the projects and decide what skills you're going to need to complete that project, and we'll do lessons on those skills. And so by the end of the semester, hopefully everyone in the class is able to accomplish that project. But there might not be a lesson that you're going to use on your project, but it'll apply to Jim's. And that is where the amazing thing starts to happen. And I tell them, don't think about what you know how to do right now when you propose your project. Think about what you could really use. So I had one student who she was a voracious reader. And one time she decided to make a spreadsheet of all the books she could remember reading and what she thought of them and who the author was, what year they were published, and everything. And she had a column for page length. She wanted to, know how many pages have I read? Well, some of the books she doesn't own, right? Some of them are on her shelf, but some are from the library, some were school books. And so she had, hundreds of blank cells in the spreadsheet. And she said, I want to write some way to fill those in. How could I do that? So well, let's write a web scraper. And so, her system would, open up her spreadsheet, grab the title and the author, and search one of the book review sites, and then find the first link, open it up, find the page length on that page, and then record it in the spreadsheet for her. So it would have taken her hours and hours and hours to go through by hand. The computer was able to do not just that, but now any book she reads from now on, she can just run the same program, and it goes up and grabs the information for her. And I would have never imagined of assigning that kind of assignment to the students, but allowing them to come up with their own projects, just, their collective imagination is far greater than mine.
Now you've got me wondering how many pages I've read in my life. That's a question I would like to find an answer to as well. Interesting.
Oh, I mean, he looked over at me.
I try to give you the subtle cue there.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, I had a couple thoughts. I mean, and I'm mostly interested in just how the students experience this sort of content. I mean, if I was in this class, it would be a relief to me to know that my humanities abilities, the things that I gravitate towards and I'm passionate about, are actually applicable in a technological situation. Do you find that students are, relieved, intimidated? Like, do you have to navigate emotions in this content?
Oh, man, I hope I can tell the story without tearing up myself. But yeah, no, this happened. We always think we're great teachers, and then something hits us in the face, and we realize that, oh, shoot, I got a lot of work to do. Mm-hmm. And, I as a developer, there are times when you struggle, right? And, I mean, you can search Stack Overflow, and it's not working the way it says it is, and you're trying to figure out why and why. And then we all develop kind of a happy dance, when something works out. And so towards the beginning of class, I had given an assignment that I didn't think was that difficult. This was the expert's blind spot, where it's hard for us to understand how a beginner or a novice would feel in this content. And one of the students in the class signed up for the class because I had substituted for a professor the previous semester who couldn't teach one day and asked me if I could carry a lecture for her. So I did, and the student, it was actually 2 days because it was a full week that professor was out. And on the second day at the end, the student came up to me and said, I signed up for your class next semester. So, she was really excited to be in my class. I thought, oh, this is
That's
awesome.
great.
I'm a great teacher. Clearly, after only 2 days of lecturing, she wants to take a class from me. And, everyone did their best on the assignment. And I said, okay, let's look at what happened here and which principles we were trying to use and whether or not it works, does it meet the specification and so forth. And most people needed to give it some more work. And I thought that would be normal, but I had never communicated that expectation to the students. And there's this one student who signed up for my class because she liked my teaching. Just at the end of class, I asked her to hang around for a minute. In fact, I dismissed class early, asked a couple students to hang around for help. And when I asked her a question, she said, I think I'm just going to work on this at home. And I said, okay, I understand this can be hard, but let's work. And she started crying. And I just thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? Right? I want these people to love this material like I do. And I've done something here that has just broken her. And she had a friend that sits next to her. And so that one girl left, and the friend hung around, and I came over to help her individually. And same thing, but she offered some more explanation. She said, we worked for hours on this, and we were so proud that we got it to work. And then we come in here and find out it's not good enough. And I just it broke me, I said, no, I am totally wrong here. We need to back up. I said, yeah, go home. But I want you to know that if you ever spend more than an hour on an assignment, just a homework assignment, stop and send me an email. We can always work out due dates. We can always work this out. It's so much more important that you understand that you're accomplishing great things here than it is for me to collect the assignment on that due date. And that's something I learned from a great professor as well during my undergraduate. But man, yeah, that hit me hard. And so I'm very much now making sure that I give a lot of praise, and also recognize how far they come. Mm-hmm. And so occasionally, we'll put up something on the board or on the projector of some code and talk about it. And I'll say, how many of you could have used those words 2 months ago when the semester started, right? Just to make sure that we're tracking our own progress and seeing that we've come a long way. So, but yeah, navigating those emotions is very, very difficult. Mm-hmm. Teaching Python makes this kind of easy, though. Not as easy as when I taught the web publishing course, because you can, the great part about teaching, how to build a website is that students all have interests that they'll stay up till 2:00 in the morning choosing the perfect font, for their website. With Python, when we get into modules, because the great part about the Python ecosystem is that there are thousands and thousands of modules that people have written to accomplish exactly what you need. Mm-hmm. And when you realize, for example, this one student who had a spreadsheet, it's like, well, yeah, we can open up spreadsheets and edit them. Really? Because that's what I wanted to do. I had another student who had married a woman from Finland, and he was trying to learn Finnish, and everything she was giving him to read was just beyond his level. I said, do you think that Python has something that could judge the reading level of a Finnish text? I said, absolutely. And so that was his project, actually, was to write something that his wife could send him something, and he would analyze it and say, no, you know what? I need something that's at a 2nd grade level, not at a 9th grade level. And so, yeah, getting that piece of interest, right? And like I said, with Python, the great thing is somebody's written something to help you do what it is that you want to do. And now that we're at that point, I mean, those 2 students are still in my class, and I mean, I think they've overcome those difficulties at the beginning, but it was as much my fault as anything to have not scaffolded that experience sufficiently.
Well, it reminds me, I mean, we've talked about this on the podcast, so I apologize, Randy, if I'm bringing up drums again. But
I thought you were going to bring up AI.
Oh, no. I tried to avoid that because we talked. Well, we'll bring it up.
Better strike that question out.
Over the break, I actually had a drum lesson. I've been working on drums for a while. It's kind of been my hobby just to keep me fresh. But one of the reasons why I do it is that I want to feel that experience of being a student, because that experience, if you teach long enough, you do the expert blind spot that you were saying. You just go like, why is this a problem? Why are you scared to do this? Like, this is easy. And it's because you've spent most of your life doing it. And so I'm sitting here playing drums, getting a lesson from an expert, a professional drummer, and I just forget how to hold the drumsticks in front of him. I just get so intimidated. He asked me to do something that an hour later after the lesson, I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that. But at that moment, and it reminds me as a student that, when we call on them and say, what do you think is the answer? They probably, most of the time, if they did the work, they know the answer, but they're just terrified or they don't know how to articulate it in a classroom. And so it's a good reminder to know that sort of extra coaxing, that praising, that, and one thing I appreciated about this drum lesson, and I was noticing, from a teaching standpoint, this instructor just he found good things that I was doing well, and said, that was great. And I could tell, I'm like, he's not patronizing me necessarily, but he was trying to say, like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you how terrible you are. That's not good teaching. That's not teaching that's going to motivate you. And that reminds me as a teacher, and like what you're saying, is that we need to kind of bring these students into a place where they don't dread it, because they're already nervous about the content. They're already nervous. And I mean, I'm guessing, I always have to remind myself, especially in the upper division level, they took this course because they don't have the knowledge yet. At the lower division, sometimes they just feel like, okay, I'm taking another writing course or something. But at the upper division, they do not know, they don't have the knowledge, so they're trying to learn it from you. And so, I mean, what are some things in your courses that some exciting moments of discovery that you have with your students?
Okay. Well, I'll go to one of them. Was when I taught the web development class. And it's, we spend a couple of weeks using WordPress, just to show them how to get content online. But then it is, hey, we're going to code something from scratch. We're going to write HTML and CSS and some JavaScript all from scratch, and building up to a final project, which is a site on whatever they want. I've had K-drama, I've had Japanese baseball leagues, I've had crocheting, and somebody, did kind of a website about the best organic food available in the Valley, and it was this one student who, so last day of class, okay, your project's due. Who wants to show them off? We don't have time to see everybody's, but if there's a couple people who want to show this, one girl, her hand just shot straight up, and I said, Amy, yeah, come on up. And so she pulled up her website, and I just stopped right there, and I said, you know what? That's not the website that you've been working on. This is totally different than what we looked at last week. And she said, yeah, I know. I've been pulling all-nighters for a couple of nights, but I had this idea, and I just wanted to get it done. And she was so beaming with pride. And I told everyone else, I said, well, this is a fantastic example of a fantastic piece of work, but this is a rare event, right? Because we spent all semester, describing this website, planning this website, and how we're going to do it, and then to take a completely different direction at the end. But she had that passion to follow through on it. When we in Python, concepts like loops, there's something called a dictionary in Python where you have a value that's associated with another value. And learning how that works, gives a lot of those aha moments. That's it. Without going into details in the Python class, it's kind of hard to come up with that. But I think most of what I see is the pride at the end when the students have something that they can show. I do have a great example. This was, again, from the web publishing class. I was advising a student at the end of her capstone project and asking her about the program. She was graduating, going on to law school. And she just couldn't say enough about the program and about all the technology she had learned. And she said, I look at that website, and that's something I built. That's something I accomplished. And I said, you went to a Final Four in women's volleyball. She was an All-American middle blocker on the volleyball team. And she kind of had that L from Legally Blonde moment. She said, like that's hard. Right? Because a volleyball player is who she was. That's who she saw herself to be. And so accomplishing great things on the court was just part of the deal for her. But then to be able to put up her own website, that was something for her that was beyond what she normally considered herself capable of doing. So that was another example of that. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad that both of you advocate the non-Gordon Ramsay approach to teaching. I've never understood the appeal of a show where at the end, you find out that Gordon Ramsay's just better than all these other chefs. I mean, didn't we know that beforehand? I mean, what's the purpose behind that?
Well, and I've got a story for that. So our print publishing courses are taught for our editing and publishing majors. But they're essentially, I mean, they're a Photoshop, Illustrator, and design, and they're taught by freelancers mainly. Come in as adjuncts to teach these students, and they're design classes, but these aren't people in design majors. These are editing and publishing majors who have to speak to designers and have to have some design skills, but they're not going to be graphic designers, most of them. And I had an old friend who lived up in Salt Lake, and I thought, hey, we're teaching a section up at the BYU Salt Lake Center, and contacted him to see if he'd be interested in teaching for us. And he's a high-end graphic designer up in Salt Lake Valley. And he said, I will do it on one condition. So what's that? He's like, I want to do what my instructors did to me. I said, well, what was that? He said, well, we'd bring our final work in on art boards, and we'd put them on the chalk tray of the chalkboard. And then he would pace in front of them, considering them. And slowly he'd begin to knock them down. And then when he had the ones left up that he wanted to talk about, he would continue to lecture while walking on top of the work that he didn't like.
Wow.
And I said, well, hey, you know what? I'll give you a call back sometime. Because there's this idea of like, no, I need to beat you down and you really need to impress me.
Right.
As opposed to saying these students need to be built up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
No, I agree. I think that I mean, I would say there are students that need motivation, and there's some students that are like, okay, like I'm not going to praise, subpar work when I can tell that you're not trying to do well. But I find most of the time, if you even get to the root of it, you find that it's not maybe that they don't. I in my experience, there's not as many lazy students as there maybe are portrayed in the world. I think there's just some kind of rooted like insecurity. It's like, oh, well, I'm not good enough, so I'm not going to try. And like, okay, well, let's work with that. And I don't find that personality is driven by someone saying you're terrible. And you're like, well, I think a lot of the students will believe that, and then they will go away. Maybe a small fraction will use that as motivation. But most of the time, in my experience, those students are not motivated by that negativity.
No, and also it's funny. I heard a professor say the other day that whenever he sees a student that's exhibiting problems in the class is almost never the problem. Is that remember, these students are human, and they probably have things going on in their life. And it's been amazing to me the number of times I've sat down with students and say, listen, just is something going on, and whether or not they tell me exactly what it is, they almost all admit to, yeah, there's something going on. And it's like, okay, what can I do to help? And I had this experience not at BYU, but I used to teach in a SUNY school near Rochester, New York. And I had an evening class, and a student walked in, just pale-faced, like I thought she was going to faint. And so I intercepted her at the doorway, walked her outside, and said, look, I do not know what's going on, but please, consider whether or not this is the best place for you to be tonight. And she said, no, it is. And she was right. She needed to calm down. She sat in the back of the class, didn't participate much, but came up and talked to me after the class and kind of laid it on the line of things that were going on in her life. And I said, okay, we need to get you withdrawn from school. We can't save your tuition, but we can save your GPA, because she had some pretty big things going on in her life. And she came back later and finished my class another semester and went on to graduate. And, it really is, we need to remember that the classroom walls are not the sum total of these students' existence, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a question for you that just kind of popped into my mind as we were talking. I mean, Jim and I have both taught online courses and talked about pedagogical adjustments that you make when you teach online courses. And, we've all been trained to not assume that our students, we've been reminded that we have a tendency to overestimate the digital abilities of our students. As we see a generational shift, as we move into, our students being primarily Gen Zs and, not, too far down the road, even beyond that, in your classes that do require technology, are you finding that the younger students, the younger generation students have complementary digital skills, different digital skills, or what's your observation about that?
My first observation is to thank you for not using one of the worst terms invented in the last 25 years.
Which is?
Digital native.
Ah.
Okay, so I was in grad school. I did my graduate work in educational technology and ed psych. right? So, and I was being told in the early 2000s that I was a digital immigrant.
Oh.
When typing list, load, and run into DOS, 1.2 on my family's IBM computer, I was doing that before I could read properly, right? Because that's how you started programs. That's how you started games and everything. And it was just kind of this strange assumption that just because I was a certain age meant that I was somehow not, I didn't have experience with technology. But it also expressed a strange misconception of technology, that's some sort of unitary concept, that once you know how to use technology, you know how to use all technology.
Exactly.
All right. And so at the time I was thinking, and this is important because I was early in grad school, I started to realize that my music tastes were out of phase with with my students. And I realized, well, I don't have any time to sit there and listen to music or go to concerts when I'm writing my dissertation, right? And still, even now, I enjoy the music that, came out from when I was in college or earlier,
Yep.
right?
Same here.
And I kind of feel like that's how it is with technology, is that, yes, okay, at this time in 2006, these students were having an online presence, right? Blogger was getting going, and you were having the nascent phases of social media. They weren't afraid to get online and say stuff, and whereas their parents, or just a few years before, the students, we had to coach them into how to create an online profile and everything. But they knew how to use email, that previous generation did, right? And then tablets came out. Okay, well, mobile computing is going to be something that this generation knows, but they're not going to know wearables, right? And now we've got AI, to bring up that word again, and that, and so it's being a digital native, I don't think exists, because technology is constantly evolving, right? And so what we're seeing is not more or less skill of the incoming students. We're seeing a different set of skills. Whether you're programming in Python, or especially if you're programming on the web, you have to have a solid understanding of file structure. That is to say that information on a computer disk is stored in directories or folders, as they're often portrayed, and in those can be other folders and files, which are kind of terminus nodes, right? They contain information and they have a name. Because if you want to make your image appear on your website, you have to know where it's stored, and you have to know how to navigate around this. It was 2 or 3 years ago that we started realizing, really post-COVID, that students don't understand that anymore. It used to be a foundational concept of understanding how to use a computer. Now you just save your computer or your file and you search for it, right? Or it pops up in your recent list. And so we're finding that while these students, hey, they're totally comfortable being online, they're totally comfortable using a mobile device, they're comfortable using AI, they're less, they don't have some of the foundational skills that are required to actually make the computer work in terms of a programming paradigm.
Yeah. That on a smaller scale, that's been my experience. That, and when I teach English 2010 composition class, I always have them finish the semester with a in-class presentation. And, over the years, I've just watched it kind of transform exactly as you just described. A student shows up and, they either have access to their file, or they just look at me and they say, well, there's a computer there in the front of the classroom. Where's my file? And I'm like, what exactly do you mean? Where did you save it? Where did you store it? Well, I made it on my Google Drive. I made it in Google Docs. Where's my file? And I've experienced that too. And I appreciate your description of it. It's not they're more skilled technologically or less skilled technologically. It's just different skills.
Mm-hmm. Well, I compare it to cars. I mean, decades ago, you had to, start your car up by pulling on a crank, right, to get the motor spinning. And then later, you turned a key and it had an electric motor in it that would turn that crank until you started. But you had to hold that key until the engine started. And if you couldn't get it to start, you could push start it, by, don't do this if you have an automatic transmission, right? The manual transmission, you could pop the clutch going down a hill and get the engine to come to life. And now it's a button, right? Yep. And it's not like you hold that button in until the starter motor has engaged the engine. You just touch it and it works, right? This is a great accomplishment. I'm sorry, this is advancement, but it means that the people operating the vehicle are more distant from the actual functioning that's going on under the hood.
Yep, great comparison.
I went to a conference, speaking of conferences, this was several years ago, but it was a conference in Washington, D.C. It was at George Mason, and I remember getting the rental car, and the guy said, yeah, the key's in the car. And I get into the car, it's open, and I cannot find the key. and it was kind of under this glove box, but I was like, where's the key to put it in the ignition? And then it was the first experience I ever had with one of the push button cars, and I felt so out of date. I'm like, I don't understand that you can just press a button. And
the key
this was not like last year, I promise.
The key
this was a while back.
Something that has to be in the proximity for you to push the button, right? I've had a couple rental car experiences like that.
Should we ask an AI question? Do you have an AI question?
I do have an AI question, and it's the AI question that just kind of covers what we've been talking about. We've been talking about how skill sets are changing and how abilities are changing and focus is changing. Jim and I primarily look at AI from a composition standpoint. What does it mean to composition students, both positive and negative? How do you see digital humanities and digital humanities students changing as a result of AI?
Okay.
How has AI presented itself in that discipline?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's a topic for a separate podcast, of course, right?
Of course.
But when I think about AI, I saw somebody write that our first contact with AI was not ChatGPT. It was Twitter's algorithm. That, back in, I think it was 2010, when Twitter decided to curate your feed. And there were a lot of us who were like, what's going on here? Why can't I see this in chronological order? Like it's always been, and they had a home and a feed, I think, and you kept having to switch back to your feed to get it the way you wanted to. And the idea was, well, we've got all of these likes and we know what people like you like, and we can start to drive engagement and keep you engaged longer. And I mean, we called it the algorithm, but it's an AI, right?
Yeah.
And I read that the person who created that, or it might have been the person who copied it at Facebook, I can't remember, but said it was like handing a 4-year-old a loaded gun. That nobody knew what this was and how it would drive us, right? So we've already been experiencing AI, and for both positive and negative. I mean, heck, when I'm running on my treadmill and I've got YouTube pulled up, I can just hit the next button and it shows me something that it thinks I'm gonna like, and it's gonna distract me from the pain in my legs, right? And so again, that's progress. But at the same time, how many times have we caught ourselves doom scrolling, right? And we just keep going, and no matter how long it takes us to say, it's like pulling the handle on the slot machine, right? No matter how many times the video is not something we like, we just scroll the next one. And so first of all, yeah, AI is something that I think we engaged with a lot earlier. It just wasn't as evident, right? And the second thing was, when ChatGPT burst on the scene a few years ago, most universities panicked. What is this going to do to us? And composition professors, in my experience, were, not so much composition, but the literary analysis professors were really in a world of hurt, because they were asking students to write the same papers they had asked students 20 years ago to write.
Right.
And if you see the students not as humans, but as machines that are just supposed to reproduce what you want them to reproduce, a machine is very good at that. It's gonna fool you, or at least it's gonna fool the students into using it. So one of the first things I did when ChatGPT came up was pull up some of my assignments from my Intro to Digital Humanities class. And one of the things that one of the assignments was make a topic model of this novel. Separate it into, each chapter is a document, run a topic model, give me 10 to 20 topics, and let's see how the chapters group according to these topics. And ChatGPT, the best it could do was spit out some Python code.
Really?
Yeah. And we gave the students a tool to use. Right? Here's the tool that will run the topic model for you. But because the students were choosing their own novels to do, right, the odds of them being able to have ChatGPT do the assignment for them was pretty small. And so that's, to me, one of the forced moments of creative deconstruction in our field, is that we now have to evaluate our assignments in terms of how well can a machine do them. Because if a machine can do them well, why are we having students in colleges do them for us as well? And so, but it can just be a little tweak. If you ask a student to write a paper in the style of somebody, the machine's going to be able to do that. But if you ask the student who their favorite authors are, and then you start asking them to summarize those works, and then to compare the styles between the works of these different authors and everything, you very quickly arrive at a combination that ChatGPT is not able to accomplish.
Yeah.
And in terms of ChatGPT in the programming class, or not just ChatGPT, but large language models. They're getting much better. They are getting much better. I have told my students you can use any LLM you want to help you on your assignments, but you must cite it. And so, and even better, now explain it to me, what happened. Because I find myself in my own coding and oftentimes my own writing using LLMs. But, well, okay, so imagine if you were using an LLM to translate into Arabic or Chinese if you don't speak those languages, right? You have no grounds for determining whether or not it's accurate. And if something's wrong, you have no idea what it is. With coding and say, okay, I'm just going to plug in the assignment description into this LLM and copy and paste the code. Well, if it doesn't work, you have no idea where to fix it.
Right.
And so, yeah, so we're very much, So I don't worry about it as much as other faculty do, but I think other faculty are right to worry about it depending on the quality of the assignments that they've been giving. No,
that's great advice, and I think that echoes a lot of what people who've been guests on this podcast have said, that, we're the ones who have to look at this and say, what are we asking our students to do? What are we asking our students for? What are the kinds of ways that we can guide them into directions that are going to be productive for them? And part of that is being honest about ChatGPT and large language models and say, yeah, they're really good at this, and let's use them to help us generate outlines. Let's use them in composition. Let's use them to help us generate keywords and phrases for database research and composition. But you allude to something that I think is a really big issue, and that is being honest about it. Students now know, for most of the professors that they whose classes they're in, if you use it, you need to be secret about it. It's something that a lot of professors don't like, so they're not completely honest about their use with it. And so those are the kinds of things I try to find positive ways to use it and try to encourage my students to be honest about their use of it. And not just, for proper attribution, but I'm curious, I want to know what it is that they're using it for and what it's good at and what they think it's not good at. That's something I would like to find out as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do we have time for my quick story about ChatGPT and my syllabus?
Absolutely.
Okay, because I told this at the conference at your
I loved it.
at your panel. But yeah, that semester that ChatGPT burst on the scene, I thought, you know what, let's just do this. And so I said, ChatGPT, write me a 6-week syllabus for Intro to Digital Humanities, and it spit something out. And I said, okay, well, add this topic, and it added that topic, and then I said, okay, well, give me, for this week, what would my outline for my lesson look like? And so I drilled all the way down until I had it writing PowerPoint slides essentially for me. Now, it's not exactly 100% ChatGPT produced because I was filtering it. ChatGPT started hallucinating articles that didn't exist for reading. And so I had to fill in the gaps. But then I had ChatGPT draft the midterm. And then after the midterm, I told the students, hey, here are the prompts. I showed them screenshots of me developing the course using ChatGPT, and they felt offended, And I think that's so interesting that, if I'm paying for a human to teach me this class, what is he doing using ChatGPT while turning around and simultaneously using ChatGPT to help me on my assignments, right? And so it was a fantastic experience, and we were able to reflect on it with the students. Like, do you feel betrayed? How do you think I would feel if you used ChatGPT and turned in an assignment, right? Now, is it cheating? Is it not cheating? We can have that discussion, but clearly there was a difference when you thought you were getting content that came out of my brain, and instead it was content that had come out of this large language model. And so that's something I think for us a good lesson for us to remember.
Definitely.
Oh yeah, it's. I don't want to even open it up as we conclude. Opening up that remembrance that I think the students do genuinely want a quality education, and as much as there is sort of that feeling that I'm going to game the system by doing taking the path of least resistance, they deep down they want that quality education that was generated from the years that we spent learning that information. And I mean, if we can combine it with a use of AI so that we can streamline and we can use it to enhance the learning environment. But, I always I took that story to mean that, like, if they were kind of upset about it, I think it's because they genuinely were hoping to get all of you from those weeks, and not like something that ChatGPT would put together.
Yeah, no, that is true. It was fun, and that was one of my favorite semesters to teach ever.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us. As always, it's been a great conversation, and a lot for us to think about, as always. And as always, it seems we got to AI eventually. It's always going to be out there for us. But good luck with your teaching. Good luck with your research. And once again, thank you for joining us. This has been the Being Human UT podcast, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
This has been the Being Human UT podcast with Dr. Randy Jasmine and Dr. Jim Hindigas. Please follow and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. From Utah Tech University, this is the Being Human UT podcast. This has been a production from a podcast studio.